Face it, you're different. Everyone is. Same goes for your banking needs. That's why Columbia Bank offers an impressive range of checking account solutions specifically designed for, well, you. Looking for high-yield interest account? Check. Rewards program? Check. Cash bonuses, mobile and online banking, Apple Pay? Check. You'll always find more checking choices for you. So check us out at your local Columbia Bank branch or ColumbiaBankOnline.com. Count on Columbia.
Equal housing lender and member FDIC.
Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Rahul Da Cunha with us on Audio Gyan. Rahul divides his time between advertising, theatre and travel. On one hand, he is running his ad agency, Cunha Communications, where he produces the famous Amul hoarding ads that has made India smile for 50 years. On the other side, he writes, directs and produces plays like Class of 84, Pune Highway, Me, KASH and Cruise. He's one of the founding members of the Rage Productions and has been writing, directing plays for past 25 years. He's an extensive traveler and a passionate photographer, and obviously an English theatre lover. So thank you, Rahul, for giving us your time, and it's a real honor to have you on Audio Gyan.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we'll be speaking about some insights into English theatre and try and document some which you have in your past 25 years, 30 years of experience. I'll start off with first asking you, I'm Not Bajirao and Class of 84 are considered to be like two milestone plays in the Bombay theatre industry, right? So can you please tell us or tell our listeners about these two plays just to set context?
So I would say that those two plays are separated by about 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both those plays came out of, let us say, a vacuum.
Okay.
That I felt,
Mm-hmm.
and I think was also something that was felt by English theatre at that time.
Vacuum, you mean in the theatre industry or your personal?
I think both, because I mean it's funny in that sense that I think my journey has been that of English theatre in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and I say city because my muse is Bombay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a city that I know. The changes is something that I know. The way that it's gone from Bombay to Mumbai, the way that language has changed, people have changed. So, because it's something that I criticize the city, it's like a marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a city that you know that you dislike a lot of it, but you can't change it.
Yeah, it's a love-hate.
It's a love-hate.
Yeah.
So, I would say that in 1995, when I, in all fairness, adapted I'm Not Bajirao from its foreign source, I felt that there was a need for the language to change. Because English, by the sheer nature of the term, indicates something that is in a certain language, which is English, but spoken in its true form, which is the Queen's English, which is in many ways what English theatre was. I'm not saying I was a pioneer, but I'm saying that largely English theatre was mainly foreign plays done as is. So the actors were called Barbara and called Bob and called Tom, and the plays were rooted in their foreign origin.
In their context.
In their context, but in their origin. So it was also, so if it was, like if you take I'm Not Bajirao, its original context was New York. But the theme was the same as I'm Not Bajirao, which is that it was old age. But old age in America and old age in India are two very different things.
Correct.
So it doesn't mean that just because the emotions being expressed are old age, they'll necessarily translate to this country.
Correct.
So it became an interesting task of not only changing the language, because one character was Parsi and one character was Maharashtrian. So it became an issue of them speaking English, but in their way. So nobody on that stage was talking English in the Queen's English way. So Boman Irani, who played the Pasi character, spoke in Pasi Gujarati English.
Correct.
Where one sentence may have some English words, but it also has Pasi Gujarati words.
Correct.
Plus all the bad words that Pasis speak also. Okay.
Yeah.
And the Maharashtrian character, obviously because he was a certain kind of Maharashtrian, his English was broken up between Marathi, Hindi and English. So which means that the two characters on stage were talking a mix of languages, which became a massive... what the reason that the play ran for so long is that it broke down all cultural boundaries.
Wow.
It allowed people who didn't know English too well to come and watch the play and enjoy it, knowing that the English being spoken on stage was not the intimidating language they know from what they learnt in school or in textbooks.
Correct.
So at the same time, it was also, it's like in the mid-90s, America was old age homes were rampant and massive. In India, nothing such as didn't exist. Today they're there, but at that time there was nothing called an old age home.
Correct. Culturally, we were never,
and even till today, the idea of putting your old father, old mother into an old age home is seen as something that is taboo.
Yeah.
You're like rejecting your parents. In America, it's seen as a good thing. So we had to change a lot because a lot of that was about old age homes and all that. So context becomes huge. Old age is a very different thing. So to answer your question, I think that was a play that is very dear to us because it made an impact. And till today, people say we saw it twice and we saw it thrice. And this time I brought my mother, that time I brought my father, this time I got my school friends. So you realize that it struck home. I mean, Shyam Benegal once told me, he says, there is no bigger icon about Bombay than I'm Not Bajirao.
Oh, wow.
He says, and it was a very touching moment for me because he'd seen the opening night. And he said everything about it was so Bombay that before that there was no real play that kind of encapsulated the city, And Class of 84 was another, because this was 96, right? Class of 84 happened exactly 7-8 years after that, where I began to feel the need to write my own play. And in all fairness, there were about 4 or 5 of us, Vikram Kapadia, Shiv Subramaniam, myself, all of whom had been directing plays till that point and had been adapting foreign plays to the Indian context. But I think we all felt that much like, Marathi theatre had the Alekars and the Tendulkars and the Cunhas, we didn't have a history of playwrights to choose from. The way that, let us say, as a young playwright or a young director in America, you have Arthur Miller, you have David Mamet. If you're in England, you have David Hare, you have Harold Pinter. There's a history of plays you can look at to do either in school productions, college productions, all of that. English, we didn't have that. And so I think we began writing, and Class of 84 was a surprise to me because it was my first attempt. I read I think Woody Allen said that the first play one writes is always a play that's closest to home. And my years in college, in Xavier's College, were hugely important for me. So I thought a play about friends reuniting 22 years after they graduated.
Correct.
Was based on some of my friends, based on some of the experiences I'd been through. And what zapped me was that the experiences that I had been through, a lot of people had been through similar such. I first wrote the play thinking, chalo, ye 10-15 show karega.
Correct.
Few of my college friends will enjoy it. 13 years later, we're still running. And what was interesting to me was that college students would come in their gangs. There were 2 examples. There was this one FYJC bunch of girls who'd come from Xavier's. They were all in between 16 and 18. Some 10 of them. And they came back and I said, like, what do you know about such a... They said the point is that we can only hope that 30 years from now we'll still be friends.
Beautiful.
And conversely, there was one of my friend's grandfathers, Kedar, can you imagine? He brought his class of 1951 batch with him.
Wow.
They, NRIs come to India in December. About 10 of them, all in their mid-70s. They came to the play, yeah.
Superb.
And I was like, man, that is like... So you know that when you do that, then you know that you've touched... I mean, there are plays that are entertaining.
Correct.
But you're outside of them. And then there are plays that you identify with. Because you know that somebody on the stage is a character that you know. And so I think these two plays were landmarks in their own way because they spoke to the audience more than just in an entertaining, TK, by the time I have dinner, I've forgotten what the play is about. Because these things, I suppose because they came from the heart, they were about emotions that everyone goes through. And I suppose that explains their longevity.
Yeah. It has more like a lingering effect after you have seen. I remember watching, I think, Natasamrat or some other play, I don't remember exactly. But I think for the next 2 months that entire landscape which they showed on the stage was still very fresh. Now obviously there's like 5-10 years back, but it still stays fresh. Rahul, as you mentioned about the plays which you, at least in India or in Mumbai, you didn't have a fallback of rich theatre history in English. So taking that point and the next question, which was in one of your interviews with Hindustan Times, you mentioned that we didn't have our voice of our own. So can you tell us, at least in the context of English theatre in Mumbai again, what was the process of finding your voice? Maybe take an example of I Am Not Bajirao itself.
I think when I say we didn't have a voice, I think one is the fact that we didn't have a tradition of playwrights from whom we could draw. And therefore, I think English theatre will always be evolving.
Okay.
When I say this, I mean that there are 4 languages in the city, right, of which theatre is done, right? Marathi, Gujarati, English, and Hindi and English. Yeah. Good, bad, and different, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati have always had a very strong theatre of their own.
Correct.
Whether it's the audience, I mean, Marathi theatre in many ways is the strongest.
Correct. Right from Bal Gandharva, Khadilkar, and a lot of other people.
They've always had a rich tradition, and also whether they have their own ways of being able to make it easier for people to see plays. The ticket rates have been cheap. The theatres have been inexpensive to hire. So anybody from a PUNE upwards has a tradition of seeing plays from a very young age. It's not like...
And different degrees of production as well.
And therefore the thing that happens is that in English, automatically it became an elitist theatre because it became a expensive theatre. So therefore it meant that a certain kind of person could see the play. Right? So I think where we came in was we began to write a play with a nuance, a turn of phrase, a language, and a dialogue format. That was the language of the streets. And I think I Am Not Bajirao in many ways was, I would like to believe, a pioneer of sorts, because before that time nobody had spoken English in such a simple way. I mean, theatre is about simplicity. It may be about complex thought, but it should be about a simple way of communicating it.
You mean not the Shakespearean language?
Not just that. The thing is that the Shakespeare is another kind of... In fact, his language is quite simple, if you actually know it.
Okay.
I mean, maybe English that is highfalutin, that it's a very complex delivery structure. So the audience is trying to understand what the playwright is saying, while instead of watching what's happening on stage. So I think we broke that down. I think it paved the way for us to be able to write the way that... Because a lot of us had directed before we wrote. So we kind of knew what is it that Indian audience is like.
Correct.
Because foreign audiences respond to a certain kind of language. The English that is spoken on a foreign stage assumes a certain level of education, a certain level of people understanding English.
Correct. And a global outlook as well.
A global outlook, whatever. We also have a global outlook, but I think English, even though it's so widely spoken and even though it's such an important language in this country, is still a difficult language. Because it's a very difficult language. I mean, Hindi is simpler. For somebody to learn English, like psychology mein P क्यों hai? You know. So I think psyche mein P क्यों hai? You know. So I think it becomes a difficult one. So when you make a joke about English on stage, automatically that fourth wall breaks down. And I think that's what a play like Bajirao did, because the two characters on stage were making fun of their own English. They English mein bolo na. The moment you say that and you're saying speak to me in English, then you're saying okay, your English is another kind of English.
Correct.
So I think that is something which has made, I would say, the audiences have quite drastically opened in the last 10-15 years, where no more is English theatre seen as an elitist theatre that is only to be seen by those who know the language well. It has now become a theatre, and in fact, what is the one that I'm trying to break the back of is, how do we appeal to young people? I still feel that across language, and this is not just English, across languages, how do we make our theatre more web series like?
Yeah, this we mentioned, you mentioned on the phone as well, where it is considered to be a very classical form, where the type of people who come are generally 40 plus, 50 plus, and then, but yeah.
So I think the main thing is that what is it that English theatre needs to do, where somebody at the age of 21 and 22 says, hey, I'm going to watch this play this weekend, and is not saying I'm going to watch a Netflix film, or I'm going to, we are not still at that stage where, unless it's a musical, unless it's something like that, which is also fantastic, but the average play, how does the format change in order to allow for a young person to feel it's their theatre?
Correct.
And not be one where only grey-haired people go to,
But does that have to do with the subject which are being chosen?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there are two things. One is the subject. And even if the subject is complex, how do you make that subject easy to understand? How do you speak? How do you make the dialogue such that even, let us say, a complex scientific play, because you don't want to be simplistic in your themes also. You want, one of the aspects of theatre is to inform.
Correct.
Like all good films should inform.
Yeah.
But the moment you make the level of expression also complex, then you're not going to have somebody watching,
Correct.
And the greatness, I think, of the web and the Netflix of this world is they offer you such a bouquet of films, where even something as complex as, let us say, the 9/11 attacks, this looming tower, is done in such an interesting thriller, non-documentary, non-pedantic, non-lecturing kind of way that even a young person says, how interesting, though it was such a terrible disaster in 9/11, you can make something out of it that is so user-friendly. So I think the word is user-friendly and theatre audience-friendly is what we need to look at.
Correct. Yeah, I remember one audiogram which I did with Ramu Ramanathan also, and he said that a lot of it has to do with that if the playwright has a subtext to it, then it makes it much more interesting. I mean, one conscious effort which the playwright has to put in is to have a subtext. And the moment you put that, there's suddenly a lot more depth in the content, and then that could probably put off a young person.
But see, that is the interesting thing, that I think as I'm getting older, I'm finding myself letting go some of the rules that I learned some time ago, because I find that Indian audiences find complexity in subtext. अगर बोलना है तो straight बोलो ना. Don't ask me to. I mean, I appreciate अगर तू बोल रहे है स्टेज पे, एक्टर्स को बोल रहा है कि मैं आपको प्यार करता हूँ.
Correct.
But of course, it's interesting when you don't actually mean that.
Yeah.
You're saying something else. You know. Then I understand that. But if it's a complex thought that is made even more complex by subtext, it is layered. But do you then end up with an audience not understanding what you're saying? So it's a bit of a catch-22 where our audience, because we are nascent still,
Correct.
so are audiences.
Yeah.
Like there was this one big production that was very, very popular in the city. And this friend of mine came out and I said, what do you think? They said, costumes were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what about the play? That was good. Yeah? So you realize that it's our audiences want to be dazzled because finally we are a Bollywood country.
Correct.
Whatever you say, we like is a larger than life.
Yeah.
And so when you give it a larger than life feel on a stage, it'll do really well because we want to, audiences I realize want to tali. In a film you can't tali. You can go after that and talk about the film, but finally it's a private experience.
Correct.
In a darkened auditorium.
Yeah.
Theatre is different. You know that every night is different, and that's what we do theatre for, because there's that every show is a new show.
Yeah.
A phone goes off, and that dialogue can just stop. In a film, even when you're shooting, when you retake. Yeah.
Correct.
But the other side of that is that I think because audiences are simple-minded and they come, like in America and England, audiences go to the theatre to be stimulated. I do believe that audiences come to the theatre in India to get to be relaxed.
Yeah.
That leave their brains at home.
Correct.
Is something which is always a problem. And it's a problem for Bollywood too.
Correct.
Like a film like Razi, or a lot of the modern films being made, give me in theatre hope, because a film like Razi is not a comedy. It's quite a serious issue. But because of the stars and because of the acting, because of the drama, because of the dialogue, it's got good minds behind it.
Correct.
It's not just been made with the box office in mind.
Yeah.
The day we can make that leap in the theatre, where you can still work with a fairly serious theme, but have enough emotion in there, have enough, not necessarily songs, but something that makes you feel that was an interesting evening out. That's the most we can hope for.
Yeah, there's a play, Stories and Songs, which I think has that complete packaging of
Bollywood. I think what is slowly, and this fascinates me, that many of the trends that we see in the theatre are English theatre trends.
Correct.
Frankly, if I were to be totally honest about theatre in the city, there is frankly no Hindi theatre, really. There may be plays being done, but there's no regular theatre. The way that Bollywood is all in Hindi.
Correct.
You would think that we are very vibrant Hindi theatre, but there isn't. Gujarati theatre, social dramas have got their own kind of...
And mainly commercial angle.
Mainly commercial, whatever. It's not, there's no real experimental Gujarati theatre, frankly.
Correct.
And Marathi is Marathi. It's just been whatever it is. And it's always, it's the reason why I think we all love the theatre, because of Marathi theatre, frankly. English theatre is the one where audiences have got paying power. To me, that's why English theatre has always been fascinating. It's my language, so there's no doubt about that. But the audiences can vary from the Prithvi audiences who don't want to pay a lot of money to the NCPA audiences who can pay money.
Correct.
And so therefore, I notice certain trends, like the modern trend is the musical format in theatre seems to be catching. Whether stories, whether the musicals being done. I myself am launching a musical late October, fully written by me and my partner Bugs, fully original, because now is the time to do that. And there is something interesting about being involved in a activity where you know that nothing is constant. Change is everything.
Correct.
There's something slightly spooky about it, because you don't know what's going to come up next. But you also know that if it's got quality and if it has got enough, what I'd say, goodies in there to engage an audience, they will come.
Yeah, I think it makes me wonder now, because if you consider the entire history of Indian theatre in general, obviously I don't have much knowledge into it, but if you see, a majority portion would be under the British rule. So I think that's where the communicating a subtext culture must have developed, because they couldn't speak it outright, right? Because there were a lot of things which we wanted to politically be right, and that thought process must have continued in the playwright's mind till date. But now the audience has evolved and they have seen a free India. So as you mentioned, ki direct bolna ki pyar hai. So
I don't know if it's about a foreign. I mean, the thing that is quite important is that subtext is a massively important aspect of playwriting. You cannot not. I mean, there's a difference between dialogue and just chatting.
Correct. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's about a foreign thing or not, but I do know this much, that don't confuse an audience. If you can, it's that fine line. Writing for a foreign audience and writing for an Indian audience are two different things. You know, and I think because, I mean, if you look at even Hindi movies, English films don't have an interval.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, nowhere else in the world is there an interval where you have to stop that movie at a 1 hour point, and then you have to pick them up again after 20 minutes. And it's fascinating. Ram Madhwani once told me that the first 5 minutes after the interval, what they call Chana Mamra. It's called Chana Mamra, you know. So you have to either, that's why they put a song in there, you know, to get the audience back, because they're getting their popcorn and their nachos and all that.
Correct.
So we have a very different way of watching. You know, if a man's on a mobile phone watching a film, it doesn't mean that he's not enjoying the film. He just said he feels he can multitask.
Correct.
Now you have to make sure that, you know, today's kids stay off that mobile phone.
Yeah.
And don't do WhatsApping while they're watching you, because that means they're bored.
Yeah.
So, in very many ways, what one learns in the craft has to be adapted in many ways to the country you're in. I think there's a certain sophistication that is lacking in our audiences.
Yeah.
Because of the way we are.
Correct.
It's not that, you know, it's not theatre manners only, but it's just a question of the thoughts can't be too complex, the dialogue. Humor works great.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry to say, in a sense, very serious plays in our country don't work. And I think it stems from the fact that people just have a really hard day.
Correct.
And they don't want to go to the theatre, and then have an even harder time understanding, you know.
Yeah, coming back to the English play, I understand where we are heading towards, but I think that will be like a separate discussion altogether. So why do you think an English play in India is not popular as your Amul girl hoarding, right? I mean, what are the learnings theatre walas can have from can glean from Amul hoardings, right?
I guess simplicity of thought. I think it comes back to the same thing, which is that the subjects that are covered. So to me, I write a column also, right? So to me, the plays that I write, the Amul hoardings that I do, and the column that I write are always tied into each other.
Okay.
Because I find that my personal, if I can use the word strength, seems to be to write about things that people are thinking about.
Okay.
I wouldn't write about a queen from the Deccan. You know, that's not a subject like a lot of my contemporaries like history. They like. To me, it's something that India is going through at the moment. Is my biggest interest. So, what is important today, the play may not be relevant 10 years from now because that issue is not important anymore.
Correct.
But for me, that issue is important for the moment.
Correct.
And which is why in Amul hoarding, what I was saying is that the simplicity of thought, and I think how to communicate. I feel plays are the most interesting and most complex of all writing forms. Because a short story, however complex, is one person writing, let us say, in a certain form, in a kind of narrative. Plays are interesting because you need to create characters. They need to communicate something to each other. They need to have different ways of speaking, otherwise they all sound like the writer.
Correct.
And they have to go through a change. Like the best kind of plays is when the leading character, by the end of the play, he's had a change from when the play began. Otherwise, it's one tone, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not like a web series or like a Netflix kind of episodic thing,
Correct.
where every episode is a continuation.
And the person also gets into the character more as the more shows happen.
Yeah. And so, even in terms of playwriting, I think it becomes important that the subject. So what I was saying was that if you take nuclear physics, if say the playwright's really interested in nuclear physics, that's too complex for an audience to understand.
Correct.
But the great playwrights of our times can take nuclear physics as the subject to make a bigger point. So they don't confuse you with the nuclear physics, but they use the complexity of nuclear physics to communicate a very simple point.
Okay.
And that's where incredible playwriting happens, because you're saying to yourself, this is a really complex play, but you know that actually what's going on. So I think subtext, one is of course in dialogue, but subtext is also in theme, also in play. That a play about nuclear physics is really about a family breaking apart. That becomes interesting because you're learning about the physics, but you're identifying with the underlying emotion. Yeah.
Wow. No, actually, this ties back to the earlier question, because if the Amul hoardings are contextual and appealing to a wide range of audience, can certain aspects of them be borrowed? So do you think that if we borrow some aspects of as long running a campaign as Amul into storytelling of theatre, will it dilute the theatre
No, I think they're two
integrity?
different things, because I mean, the Amul hoardings are based on topical events.
No, I'm talking about the simplicity or the span for which it stays. As you mentioned, it's just a 5-day contextual, very very topical based, right?
Yeah.
So same, I wouldn't say shallow, but which has that much shelf life. The same concept, if it's borrowed in theatre and you show short pieces,
You can.
Yeah.
But no, of course, I think that's being done a lot now. I think, like for example, we have a series of monologues called One-on-One.
Correct.
Which is something that I call, it's like remote theatre. It's remote control theatre. Where like when you're switching channels,
Correct.
it's almost like a monologue is literally 7 to 10 minutes. So if you've got 20 such monologues over an evening, you know that even if I don't like one,
Correct.
it'll be over in 7 minutes and I'll see the next one. Another language, another character, another. So I think I'm certainly in favor of that kind of thing, because I feel with diminishing attention spans,
Correct.
and with young people who tend to get bored if it's not. I mean, you could turn around and say, look, I don't care. I'm still going to do my kind of play.
Correct.
I do think that in keeping with the way audiences have changed, I think young audiences and audiences with less diminishing attention spans have to become something that we need to think about when writing plays.
Correct.
Because people, it's like even Hindi movies have now run from 3 hours 45 minutes to 2 hours.
Correct.
So even Bollywood producers
90
have
minutes.
realized
Yeah.
that the shorter the better.
Yeah.
Paisa Vasool is not 3 hours. And people had the time at that time. So even today's songs are more background songs. They're not necessarily lip-sync songs.
Correct.
So I think everyone's realized that time is a problem. And time being a problem means that audiences have shifting concentrations.
Correct. Yeah. I think, the playwright has to finally make that choice of whether to go down, which is towards the market trend or the audience which is liking, or just stick to his own guns and change the course of people.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
But I think, I think both are relevant. And if you can somehow piggyback
Correct.
on a changing trend, but do it in your own way, then your world is your oyster. Yeah.
Correct. Rahul, can you quickly tell us about what's the genesis of writer's block? And the playwrights we can look out for.
Well, writer's block is something that was started in late 2001, where Shanaz, Rajat, that Shanaz Priyal, Rajat Kapoor and myself, as a theatre company, we felt that playwrights for the theatre were being lost to film.
Okay. Yeah.
Either
Or
lost
TV. Or TV.
Either TV, film. So back in the 2000s, it was TV. Now it's to the web.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we were losing them to more lucrative means of writing,
Correct.
or they were writing plays knowing that there'd be no chance of it being staged ever. So Writer's Block started off with that intention that can we start a tradition of people writing plays knowing that maybe they can't make as much money as TV, but the pleasure of writing a play is like no other pleasure, because you know that your play will not change in its form. If you write a screenplay, you know that the actor is going to change the script, he's going to whatever, what you wrote and what is finally up on the screen, two different things. So we actually got into a alliance stroke tie-up with the Royal Court Theatre London.
Okay.
The Royal Court Theatre in London is like the Harvard of playwriting. They're the last of the few theatres. They're their own theatres also, but they encourage the original writing word. So whenever we can raise the money, every 2-3 years, we have a writer's block project where they come down and we select 12 writers in Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati and English, usually 2 of each or 3 of each, who we feel can benefit from this, preferably younger, so that it's at an early stage, they're not set in their ways. And then over a series of workshops with them, we produce a play.
Okay.
But original play. So it starts at the workshop. And a year later, there's a fully ready script.
Wow.
Which is then staged as part of a festival.
Okay.
So we've been doing that since 2001. We've had four up to now. And offhand, nobody comes to mind, but we have produced nearly 50 original playwrights.
Wow.
That have come out of these. Many of them have gone on to become international playwrights. Many of them are doing stuff in their own languages. So it's something that we believe in strongly, which is that how do we keep the tradition of theatre alive? And of course we can keep doing foreign plays. But once audiences have tasted blood, once they've begun to realize that there are plays out there that deal with our lives, that's a really good tradition that has started.
Correct.
So yeah, that's what Writer's Block is.
Yeah, that's very noble thought. I guess this one is the last one which I wanted to ask you, is that 36 Ghante and the project of school children writing plays has been like the recent highlight, right?
Yeah.
So what next is with you, or for that matter Rage Productions? What can we look forward to, and any other concluding thoughts over English theatre in general, if you have?
Well, for me personally, I'm writing a musical. Bugs Bhargava, esteemed actor, and we've been together for a long time. So we're writing an original stage musical called #SingIndiaSing.
Nice.
Is the name of the play. The music is fully composed by the great Clinton Cerejo. So it's a fully original piece of work, which opens in October. So I think that is something that we're trying next, which is that how will an original stage musical, how will it go down in a city like Bombay, for starters, that is pretty much used to foreign musicals, where people are used to the music. This is introducing them to a whole new kind of format, So that I think will be interesting certainly in my journey. Rage will always, I think, keep doing work. We've commissioned a couple of writers to write some plays. And I think in our case, it'll always be trying to do plays that don't worry about the box office. But I think it's that finding that balance between commercial and critical, where the intelligentsia comes to see our play and says, interesting. At the same time, it's not so complex Because that's the way that I think maybe that's the one place where I've learned from advertising that if the audience doesn't get it and if the audience doesn't like it, then you can shout to the rooftops ki my work is fantastic.
Correct.
But it'll only get 2 stars. Yeah.
And again, with Indian mindset, I think it is very bound to happen because मतलब वो ये पैसा वसूल एंगल तो चाहिए.
It's a but in a paisa vasool in a good way. It's not with due respect to him, not the kind of Rohit Shetty where you give the lowest common denominator, which is fantastic in its own way. But that's the mindset of the person. But at the same time, one doesn't want to be so intellectually complex that nobody gets it. So I think the brilliance about great playwriting is to be able to write the complex in the most simple way. Yeah.
Correct. Cool. I think this is a good note to end this. It was really wonderful talking to you, and I had a lot of fun. And all the best for your upcoming projects and the musical also.
Thank you.
We'll be looking forward for it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
Rahul.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Saavn, Stitcher or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.